If you're struggling with your vitality, energy, mood, focus, or sleep, this podcast is for you. Your host, Dr. Tsung, ER doctor and aerospace flight surgeon, will help you reach for the stars and remove the barriers or blockades that have been holding you back from living your best life. If you've been challenged by your health, relationships, or productivity, then it's time for a breakthrough. So here's your host, Dr. Tsung.
Hello, and welcome to It's Not Rocket Science Show. I am your host, Dr. Tsung, and this is session 2. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about why I named it It's Not Rocket Science, because I think to me, to optimize your mental, physical health, then really you have to go within. It's about your mindset, it's about your sleep, it's about stress coping mechanisms, and it's about what you eat. So it's really back to the basics. And that's why I say in the very end of the show, everything you need is already within you now. It's not rocket science. Today, I want to dive a little bit deeper into imposter syndrome and your sense of self-worth. If you want to know a little bit about what an imposter syndrome is like, we talked about it in episode 1, so go to that episode. And today I want to dive deeper on what you can do about it, some of the actionable steps. And the reason why imposter syndrome plagues us and doesn't work well is because you attach your sense of self-worth to external factors, what others think of you. And those are the things you just can't control. They have their own psyche, or they have their own trauma too, and they have their own biases. So different people they're going to interpret the same thing in different ways. So what that means is that, if you're giving a presentation, of course, there are some people who are going to love it, and there's some people who are going to dislike it for various reasons. Or if you have very simple a social media posts, you are always going to have some people who do not resonate with your message, and that's okay. So if you have imposter syndrome, you feel like you're a failure because you're not as smart as you could be, you're really a fraud. I have a friend who, after many, many years in working in consulting, and she's going for a job interview. And even then, she felt like putting on a suit for the interview. She felt like she still doesn't know anything, feels like a fraud, and that she shouldn't be there. And that's another example of why it's so hard, because you're relying on what others think of you in the interview to validate how you feel about yourself, to validate your success at your job and how you are as a human being and in your career. And the goal we want to achieve is to go within, to have internal validation, to not have to need others to feel that we're enough, that it doesn't depend on how much we know, the knowledge, how competent we are, but just that we put in 100%, and that makes us worthy and enough. So I want to tell you about my imposter syndrome story. When I was a third-year resident, I was moonlighting at this ER in Georgia, and there was a patient who came in, had difficulty breathing, and I attempted to intubate her, which is putting in a breathing tube to help her breathe. Though I was fairly new and I wasn't a bit of a rush, there are things I could have done beforehand to make sure that she was primed and ready to have the procedure done. And I was rushed, and she was not doing well with her breathing. So I went ahead and did it, and didn't prepare as well. And so I tried twice. I couldn't get it. The EMS ambulance personnel, he tried, and he was able to get it. And then that, number one, made me feel like a failure because I felt incompetent. And then by then it was too late though. Her oxygen had dropped too low and she went into cardiac arrest. Her heart stopped and we had to do chest compressions on her. And after almost, I think it was over 30 minutes, we got her back. Though after that whole entire episode, I had to go in and talk to the family. There were at least 10 plus family members to tell them what had happened. And I remember the whole time when I was talking to them, I just felt like I was a bad doctor. How could I have done that? I'm so stupid. I should have known to, prepare a little bit better. Why didn't my intubation skill, why was it not up to par? And then throughout the years, even after that incident, I always felt guilty incompetent, that I may have caused her cardiac arrest. I may have caused some sort of brain damage, I don't know, from the cardiac arrest. And anytime anyone compliments me, I always felt like a fraud because, only if you knew what I did or what I didn't do for that patient, only if you knew failure I had with dealing with various patients throughout my life. And so during the deep dive at 40 Years of Zen, that was one of the items I worked on. And I just went through the whole scenario in my head. I remember at that time I was angry at myself and I blamed others. I was like blaming others for rushing me. I was blaming others for not having the equipment ready, not having the suction ready. And I went through the whole scenario. I forgave everyone, and I forgave including myself for making that mistake, for blaming myself. I went to my 25-year-old self, and I could just imagine that she had the best intentions. She wanted this patient to do well no matter what, and she was only doing what she could have at that time with the knowledge that she had at the time, the best she could. And it was a team effort. And from that incident, I learned to always be very, very well prepared whenever I intubate any patient. I check everything to make sure it's prepared. I have backups of backups. And so I'm so thankful for that. And it has really helped me with all of my patients going forward. And if it wasn't for that incident, I wouldn't have pushed myself to read more, to learn more about the various drugs, the various procedures I could do, to always be vigilant whenever a patient comes in circling the drain like that. So I am so thankful for that. And I changed my self-worth to, it's not about how much I know, because you're never going to know enough, especially in medicine. It's not about getting the answers right. It's about going to see the patients. It's about going to a job interview. It's about giving a presentation with your best intentions, with 100% of your effort. And that's what it's about. And as long as I have done that, I gave my patients empathy, compassion, my full presence when I'm seeing them eye to eye, then I am worth it. That is full 100% authenticity. There's nothing like, no fraudulence there. And that would be enough. And so that was a life-changing experience for me when I was able to switch that mindset from how much I know to my intentions. And so I want to share with you some of the tactics I've used whenever I'm in that mindset, like, oh, what if they don't like me? Or what if I say the wrong things in this presentation? Number one, I talked about in session one, is to really go back and find those incidences where you felt the resistance, where you felt like a fraud, where you felt incompetent, where you felt fear and challenged, and go back to see where that came from, how you define your self-worth, and go back to your childhood. Go think about your family, your siblings, your parents, your grandparents, how that may have affected you and the way you define your self-worth. And number two, I would compile what's called a cookie jar list. I got this inspiration from David Goggins, who is a Navy SEAL. I read his book, Can't Hurt Me. And he mentioned creating a cookie jar list. So think about all of the obstacles, the challenges that you have ever overcome in your life. Anything that you had tried once, twice, even 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and you finally succeeded, put that down. And that's your cookie jar list, because a lot of times we remember our failures, our negative experiences, but we forget the positive experiences, that great project that we were able to bring forward and complete, that patient that we have helped and, they felt cared for. Actually, their pain was better. We forget all that. And for me, I split it up into physical and then there is a mental. The physical, I said that I was able, when I first started doing Olympic weightlifting, I didn't even know how to squat with a bar, to the point where now, 5-6 years later, I finally was able to snatch over 100 pounds, which is a huge goal for me at the time. It felt unreachable for me. Here I am. I was able to snatch 100 pounds, which is pretty awesome. Mental for me was getting over the fear of just dropping everything and going traveling for 8 months, putting everything in storage. It had been in my mind for a long time. I had an inspiration from the 4-Hour Work Week book from Tim Ferriss. And so that had been in my head for, well, at least like 5-6 years. And finally, I just have to get over the scenarios I was telling myself, like, what could happen? What if I don't find a job after? What if I don't get into fellowship after I take a year off? And what if I don't have enough money? Overcame that mental challenge, did the 8-month trip with my fiance. It was the best decision I have ever made. I want to go back. It was so amazing. It just essentially took our retirement right away. So that's step number 2. Make a list of your cookie jar, and just whenever you feel that sense of failure or fraud, go look at your accomplishment list. And number 3, it's about mindset change. So what I mean is that it's about changing your mind to, what are they going to think about me? Are they going to like this? Are they going to be okay with what I'm submitting? Change it to, how can I serve them? And how can I contribute to them? So say for a presentation that I had to do, my first presentation to an international audience, I was so scared. I didn't know what they were going to think of me. I had never presented to an audience that large, and definitely not an international audience. And I took my training and my mindset, and I told myself, no, it's not about you. It's about them. I want them to take away these 3 points from my presentation. And while I'm able to part on them, these 3 points I want them to remember, I want them to be able to follow my presentation smoothly. And I want them to feel like they're going through a story and really understand our purpose and where we're going in the future. And as long as I have done that, as long as I have given my 100%, then that's enough. You can also think about the 3 either takeaways or the feelings that you want your audience to walk away from. So say you want them to feel inspired. You want them to feel like they have gained some knowledge. You want them to feel like pumped up about what they can do. You want them to feel competent. So for this podcast, my intention before starting this podcast episode is that I want to contribute to your knowledge. I wish that you can just take one thing from what I'm saying and try it out. And if that has changed any of your habits, your mindset, then that's all I could ask for. And I told myself my intention for this is to give my 100% true self, to give my best effort, and everything is completely authentic. And for me, that will be enough for this podcast. It's not about, what people would think after listening to this episode. So I know we've all felt that way. And I wish that the tips and the action steps I share could help you. Number 1, again, just to summarize, go back to the scenarios where you felt that resistance, meditate on it. Essentially meditate just sitting quietly so you're not disturbed. Meditate on where it could have come from. Meditate on, how do you define your self-worth? And number 2, I want you to go to your cookie jar list and take a look every time you feel that way. Take a look and see how much you have done, how much you have accomplished so far. And number 3, whenever you are about to give a presentation, you're about to create, plan an event, whenever you're about to see a patient, you can set your intentions. My intention is to serve, to contribute, to be empathic, to be compassionate, to be present with my patients. And think about the feelings you want to generate. I want them to feel cared for. I want them to feel heard. I want them to have less pain. I want them to feel like that you can contribute to them. And I want them to walk away with a good feeling after this job interview, perhaps, and that you're the best thing that could happen to their company. Those are my 3 tips, and I'm going to share those with you in the show notes. So please go to the show notes at itsnotrocketscienceshow.com. And again, I'm very grateful for the time that we had together. And remember that everything you need is within you now. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review in iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing to win a private VIP day for a health and life makeover with Dr. Tsung herself. Then be sure to head on over to itsnotrocketscienceshow.com and pick up your free gift from Dr. Tsung. Then join us on the next episode.